The dust hung heavy in the air, thick enough to taste as the sun burned down on the small western town of Dry Creek. The street was alive with noise wagon wheels groaning, boots scraping against hard earth, voices rising and falling, but beneath it all lived something darker, something people had learned to ignore. Maria Knox stood pressed against the rough wooden wall of Crowley's general store, her fingers trembling as she pretended to study bolts of faded cloth. She had been there too long. She knew it. But leaving meant walking into his sight, and she was not ready for that yet. Across the street, her father staggered out of the saloon. Even from a distance, she could tell how much he had been drinking. His steps were uneven, shoulders hunched forward like a man already bracing for a fight. The red in his face was not just from whiskey, but from rage that never truly slept. She swallowed hard. Von Kaldrick did not need a reason to hurt her. He only needed an excuse. She had learned that lesson early. The murmur of the town softened as people noticed him too. A few heads turned away. Others lingered, pretending not to stare while waiting to see what would happen. They always waited. Maria felt the familiar knot tighten in her chest. Her bruises, still tender from the week before, throbbed under her dress as if warning her. She should have been home earlier. She stepped out onto the dirt road. Maria. The shout cracked through the afternoon like a whip. Her shoulders flinched. Before she could stop them, "I'm coming," she said, forcing her voice steady. Every step toward him felt like walking into a storm. The closer she came, the more she could smell the alcohol on his breath. The more she saw the anger burning behind his eyes. "You think you can wander around all day?" he snarled. "I told you to be home." I was just His hand came. Out of nowhere, the sound of the slap cut through the street, sharp and sudden. Her head snapped to the side, pain blooming across her cheek. The world tilted. For a moment, she tasted blood. No one moved. A woman turned her face away. A man pretended to study his boots. Someone hurried a child inside. Maria stayed on her feet, only because pride held her upright. "Don't talk back," he growled. "You shame me." She did not answer. She had learned long ago that words only made it worse. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging into bruises that had never fully healed. She bit back a cry as he yanked her closer. "I ought to teach you proper respect," he snarled. The street went silent, and then something changed. A sound cut through the tension. Not loud, not sudden. Just the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps. Approaching from behind the gathered crowd, people shifted uneasily. A few stepped aside without knowing why. Maria felt it before she saw him. Ah, presence? She lifted her eyes. A man stood at the edge of the street, tall and still, his dark hair tied back, his face unreadable. He wore worn buckskin and carried himself with a quiet strength that made the air around him feel different, not rushed, not afraid. He watched the scene with steady eyes that did not flinch, did not look away. Her father did not notice him at first. He was too busy yelling, too drunk on his own power. "Get up," he barked, jerking her arm harder. "That's enough." The words were calm, not loud, but they cut through the street like a blade. Every head turned. The stranger had stepped forward. He did not shout, did not threaten. He simply stood there, solid as stone. His gaze locked on her father. Something in the air shifted. For the first time, Maria felt the grip on her arm loosen. Her father turned, anger flashing. "This is none of your business." The stranger took another step closer. "It is now." The town held its breath. Maria felt something stir inside her fear. Yes, but also something else. Something dangerous. Something she had not felt in years. Hope. And in that moment, standing between her and the man who had broken her all her life, the stranger spoke again. Let her go. The world seemed to stop, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence that followed his words felt heavier than the desert heat. It pressed down on the street, thick and suffocating, as if the world itself was waiting to see who would move first. Maria felt her father's grip loosened not from mercy, but from surprise. "Who do you think you are?" Von Kaldrick snapped, his voice sharp with disbelief. "This is my daughter, my blood. You don't get to speak to me." The stranger did not raise his voice. He didn't even step closer. He simply stood his ground, tall and unshaken, eyes steady as stone. "I speak because you are hurting her," he said, "and because no man has the right." A murmur moved through the crowd. A few men shifted their feet. Others glanced around, uneasy. No one had spoken to Von Kaldrick like that in years. Von laughed, harsh and ugly. "You hear that?" he barked to the watching faces. "Some painted savage thinks he can tell me how to treat my own blood." He turned back to Maria, fingers tightening again. That was when it happened. The stranger moved. He did not rush. He did not strike. He simply stepped forward and placed his hand over Von's wrist, firm, unyielding. The grip was not violent, but it was absolute, like iron wrapped in calm. "Let her go," he said again, softer now. More dangerous. Von pulled, but his arm did not move. Confusion flickered across his face, followed by shock. He tried again, putting his weight into it. Nothing. A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd. Maria's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. No one had ever stood between her and her father. Not once. "Get your hands off me." Von snarled, trying to wrench free. The stranger leaned closer, his voice low enough that only they could hear. "If you raise that hand again," he said quietly, "you will lose it." The threat was not loud. It did not need to be. Von froze. For the first time in her life, Maria saw fear flicker in her father's eyes. He yanked his arm back and stumbled a step away, breathing hard. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he spat. "You don't even belong here." The stranger straightened slowly. "I belong wherever cruelty is challenged." He turned then, not to the crowd, but to Maria. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The gentleness in his voice almost undid her. Her throat tightened. She nodded, though she wasn't sure whether she meant her body or her heart. He looked at the bruise blooming on her cheek, the way her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear. Something dark flickered in his eyes. Grief, perhaps, or anger held long and deep. "Come," he said quietly. "You don't have to stand here." Her father barked a harsh laugh. "Don't listen to him. He's nothing. You come with me, right now." For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to two paths. One led back to the life she knew: fear, obedience, silence. The other was unknown, terrifying. And standing right in front of her, Maria's heart hammered in her chest. She looked at her father, at the man who had never once protected her. Then she looked at the stranger, whose eyes held no demand, only an offer. Her voice trembled. "I don't want to go with you." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Von's face twisted in rage. "You ungrateful!" Before he could finish, the stranger stepped fully between them. "That is enough." The crowd shifted back as if pushed by an invisible force. Even the dust seemed to still. "She has chosen," the man said. "You will not touch her again. You think you can take her from me?" Von roared. "I'll have the sheriff." "Aha!" Quiet laugh cut him off. The sheriff, who had been lingering near the edge of the gathering, suddenly found the ground far more interesting than the confrontation. He did not move, did not speak. The silence answered for him. Maria realized then that everyone was watching, but no one was coming to save her father. The stranger turned slightly, offering her his arm, not in possession, but in invitation. "You don't have to decide everything now," he said softly. only whether you will walk away from this moment." Her legs shook as she stepped forward. When she placed her hand on his arm, a murmur rippled through the crowd. It felt like stepping off a cliff and discovering there was ground beneath her after all. Vaughn shouted her name, raw and furious, but she did not turn back. Together, they walked away from the center of town. Each step felt unreal. The street, the buildings, the faces all blurred, as if she were leaving a dream she had been trapped in for years at the edge of the road. The stranger stopped. "My name is Ashen," he said quietly. "If you walk with me, you will not be owned. Not by me. Not by anyone." She swallowed, heart pounding. "My name is Maria," she replied, "and I don't want to be afraid anymore." He nodded once, solemn and sure. "Then walk with me." Behind them, the town of Dry Creek stood silent, watching as the girl they had never protected stepped into a future none of them could control. And for the first time in her life, Maria did not look back. The road out of Dry Creek stretched long and pale beneath the setting sun. Dust clung to Maria's skirts, and the ache in her body reminded her of every bruise she carried. Yet her steps felt lighter with every yard she put between herself and the town. She walked beside Ashen in silence. The sounds of Dry Creek faded behind them voices. Wagons, the distant clang of metal until there was only wind. The slow creak of leather and the soft rhythm of their footsteps. The land opened. Wide around them, empty and vast, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Maria finally spoke. "They'll come after me." Ashen nodded. Yes. The honesty startled her, but she respected it. They don't let go of what they think belongs to them. She looked down at the dust clinging to her shoes. "I don't belong to anyone." Faint curve touched his mouth. "You're learning quickly." They walked until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and fire. When they reached a narrow valley tucked between weathered hills, Ashen stopped. "We'll rest here tonight," he said. She nodded, suddenly exhausted. Her body ached in places she hadn't noticed until now. He showed her where to sit. How? To rest her back against a rock still warm from the sun. Without a word, he gathered dry branches and coaxed a small fire to life. His movements were practiced, calm, respectful of the land, as the flames flickered. Maria felt the tight knot in her chest loosen for the first time in years. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Ashen stared into the fire before answering. "Because I've seen what happens when no one does." She waited, sensing the weight behind his words. "I once had a family," he said at last. "A wife, a child. They were taken from me by men who believed power gave them permission." Her breath caught. "I'm sorry. So was I," he replied softly. "For a long time, I thought grief was all I had left. Then I saw you today. And I realized that if I turned away, I would lose the last piece of myself that still remembered." What was right? The fire crackled between them. "I don't know where I'm going," she admitted. "I've never had the chance to choose." He looked at her then, really looked, and something gentle softened his expression. "Then we will. Walk until you do." Night settled around them, cool and quiet. Stars spilled across the sky, brighter than she had ever seen. For the first time, the darkness did not frighten her. When she lay down to sleep, the ground was hard, the air cold, but her heart felt strangely full. She slept, and she dreamed not of fear or shouting, but of open land, of freedom, of a life shaped by her own hands. At dawn, the sound of hooves stirred her awake. She sat up, heart racing, but it was only Ashen preparing the horses. He handed her a small bundle of dried food and water. "We leave early," he said. "There are people who will come looking." She nodded. "I'm ready." They traveled for hours, moving through hills and open plains. As the sun climbed higher, Maria began to notice something else. How her shoulders felt lighter. How her breath came easier. She was not bracing for pain anymore. She was moving forward. By late afternoon, they reached a narrow valley hidden between rocky slopes. Green crept along the ground, fed by a clear stream. Smoke curled faintly in the distance. "What is this place?" she asked. "A refuge," Ashen replied, "for those who have nowhere else to go." As they approached, figures emerged, men, women, children. Some watched warily. Others smiled in quiet recognition. An older woman stepped forward, her dark hair streaked with silver. Her eyes softened when she saw Maria. "You are welcome here," she said gently. "Any friend of Ashen's is welcome." Something in Maria's chest loosened. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself together. The days that followed passed slowly, then all at once. She learned to fetch water from the stream, to tend the small garden, to help prepare food. No one shouted, no one struck her. No one demanded obedience. They asked. They listened at night. She sat by the fire and listened to stories of journeys, of loss, of rebuilding after everything had burned. She began to laugh again, softly at first, as if afraid joy might vanish if she grasped it too tightly. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ashen sat beside her. "You're different now," he said. She smiled faintly. "So are you." He studied her, then nodded. "You stand taller." "I don't feel afraid all the time anymore," she admitted. "I didn't know that was possible. Takes time to unlearn fear," he said. "But you are learning." She hesitated, then asked, "Why do you stay here? With all of this danger?" He looked out toward the mountains. "Because some places are worth protecting. And some people remind us why." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. That night, as the fire burned low and the valley settled into quiet, Maria lay awake, thinking of the road behind her and the one ahead. She did not know where she would end up, only that she would not go back. She was no longer someone's burden. She was becoming someone of her own making. And for the first time, as the stars turned slowly overhead, Maria slept without fear, held not by walls or chains, but by the simple, powerful knowledge that she was free. The valley changed with the seasons, and so did Maria. Spring melted into summer, and the land softened under warmth and sun. The streams ran clear. The fields grew green, and the small community settled into a steady rhythm. Days were filled with work mending fences, tending crops, gathering woodbutt for Maria. Each task felt like a quiet victory. Every blister, every ache reminded her that she was alive by her own will. She was no longer afraid of her own shadow. She had learned to ride without fear, to handle tools with confidence, and to walk the land without feeling small. The scars on her body remained, but they no longer defined her. They were reminders of what she had survived. Ashen watched her change with quiet pride. He never rushed her, never claimed her, never spoke of the future unless she asked. That patience, more than anything, told her who he truly was. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, Maria stood beside him near the ridge overlooking the valley. Below them, the settlement glowed with small cooking fires, the low murmur of voices carrying on the breeze. "I never thought peace could feel like this," she said. Ashen nodded. "Peace is not silence. It is knowing you are safe enough to breathe." She smiled at that. But peace, she would soon learn, is fragile. The warning came at dawn. A boy ran into the valley, breathless and pale. "Riders," he gasped. From the east, armed, moving fast. The air changed instantly. People moved with purpose, not panic. Weapons were gathered. Children were ushered inside. Ashen's face hardened as he scanned the horizon. Maria felt the familiar twist of fear in her stomach, but this time, it did not paralyze her. "They've come back," she said quietly. "Yes," Ashen replied. "And this time they won't leave with words." They took positions along the ridgeline. As dust rose in the distance, soon figures emerged, armed men on horseback. Hard-eyed and determined, dot at their center rode her father. Her chest tightened, but she stood her ground. He looked thinner, more ragged than before. Desperation carved deep into his face. The man she had once feared now looked smaller, weaker, yet more dangerous in his desperation. "This ends today," he shouted, his voice echoing across the valley. "You can still come home, Maria. I'll forgive you." She stepped forward before Ashen could stop her. "There is no home for me with you," she said clearly. "Only pain." He scoffed. "You think these savages care about you? They'll turn on you. They always do." Ashen moved beside her, not in front of her. "You speak of what you do not understand." Her father's eyes flicked to him, filled with hatred. "You took her from me." "No," Maria said. Her voice did not shake. "You lost me?" Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then her father laughed a broken, ugly sound. "If I can't have you," he said, "no one will." His hand went to his gun. Everything seemed to slow. Maria did not scream. She did not freeze. She stepped forward. "Stop," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "This ends now." For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Ashen moved. He stepped between them, his body a shield, his presence unyielding. "You will not touch her again," he said quietly. "This is your last warning." The men behind her father shifted, uncertain. Some looked away. They did not want this blood on their hands. Her father's hand trembled. Rage warred with fear in his eyes. "You think you've won," he spat. "You think this ends here." Maria met his gaze, steady and unafraid. "It ends with me choosing my own life." Her words landed heavier than any weapon. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, her father lowered his gun. The fight drained out of him all at once. He looked old, tired, small. "This place has changed you," he muttered. "No," she said. "It saved me." He turned away without another word, mounting his horse with shaking hands. One by one, his men followed, disappearing back into the dust. The valley exhaled. Ashen looked at Maria, something like pride shining in his eyes. "You faced him," he said, "on your own." She nodded, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. "I was afraid." "So was I," he admitted softly. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing not to be ruled by it." The sun dipped low, the valley filled with quiet relief. People began to speak, to move, to breathe again. Maria stood at the center of it all. No longer the frightened girl who had fled a town in shame. She had chosen her own path. That night, as the stars spread across the sky, she sat beside Ashen near the fire. The warmth between them felt steady, earned. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," she said. He looked at her, his gaze calm and sure. "Then we will meet it together." She smiled, and for the first time, the future did not feel like a threat. It felt like a promise.